Daniel chapter 7. Why do you go to church? Why are you even here? And here's the answer. Because we serve a God who knows the future. No other religion, no other philosophy, no other way of thinking knows the future except your Bible that catalogs the future, and it's sitting right in your lap. That's why we're here. Because the God who created everything says, I love you, and I got stuff for you if you'll just see it. So tonight, for the skeptics and for all of us children of God, I pray that this is a very uplifting time. God is going to, through the Bible, through Daniel, he's going to predict 4, really 5 great empires. He was predicting this, of course, probably 5 centuries before Jesus was born. And we, looking back, it is so clear. Let's refresh ourselves, if you would, Blake, go ahead. In Daniel chapter 2, there's my book of Daniel in Hebrew. Remember, you read right to left. Hit the go button if you would. In Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And the dream was of a great big statue, polymetallic. And the top was a head of gold, and that would be the Babylonian Empire. Go. And of course, you've seen these pictures before. It was a substantial empire. This is 6 centuries BC, thereabouts, when the Neo-Babylonian Empire kind of gets cruising, and then Daniel's going to show up. And this is what Nebuchadnezzar and his father Nabopolassar, that's what they pull off. You can see where Babylon is. You can see the Persian Gulf. You see where Elam is. See Shushan or Susa. That's important tonight. That was amazing. Hit the go button. And he built one of the richest cities that the ancient world had ever seen. You've seen me show this 100 times. There's the Euphrates River. Go. Here's their big ziggurat. That was to Marduk. It was amazing. Babylon was never technically destroyed. It just kind of wasted away. Babylon is the devil's city. Like Jerusalem is God's city, Babylon is his city. It's going to rise again. We've talked about that. But here, go ahead, hit our go button. There's Nebuchadnezzar's palace. Truly amazing. Here's an artist's rendition. There's the Euphrates with those boats nearby. You'll see many levels, and you'll see waterfalls. You'll see all kinds of beautiful species way up on the top floor. The Hanging Gardens, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Go. And then there was the Ishtar Gate. And those big, amazing blue stones were found 1850s and later. Go. Sir Robert Caldaway found practically every single one of them, dusted them off, and reassembled them back in Germany. This is in Munich. This is the Pergamum Museum. And that looks like it was spruced up for the tourists. Nope, that's it. That's the real thing. Those are the Ishtar Gates. Go. On one of the sections of the Ishtar Gate reassembling, you'll notice that here is a lion with wings. This is important for our study tonight. Go ahead. Hit the go button. Well, who's next? It's going to be the Medo-Persians. That's Cyrus the Great. Go. And his major capital was in Susa. See it there? Susa, by the way, or Shushan, that's where your book of Esther takes place. And the king there, Ahasuerus, he's actually probably one of the Darius boys. But there's the Medo-Persian Empire right there at Susa. Go. And that was called in those days the Kingdom of Elam. And I was amazed not that long ago that we saw our president come up to the podium and literally fulfill the book of Jeremiah, chapter 49, that God will he will destroy the bow of Elam. And our president did that. Woo. Hit the go button. Here is some of what's left of the great big palace. That's what it looks like today. Go. Here's what it might have looked like then. Pretty amazing. It was a fertile plain, to be sure. Anyway, there is the Medo-Persian honcho's house. Go. Then Daniel 2 said there's another one coming. Go. And that is the thighs of brass. That's Greece. Go. There's Athens today. That's the Parthenon, the big rock outcropping at the top. And there is, what's the big building there on top? I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. But it's up there. Go. Here's what it probably looked like during the time of Alexander. Truly amazing. As I said, the Parthenon is up there. And then look down in the bottom portion of the slide. That is a place that the Bible referred to as Mars Hill. I'll call the Areopolis. And that is likely where Paul, in the book of Acts, mixes it up with the brightest philosophers of his day, Mars Hill. There it is. But the point of it is, what a capital. The big statue peeking out over the top, that's Athena. And that's Athena guarding the city that bears her name, Athens. Go. Who's next? Go. It's going to be the Romans. But specifically, it's going to be Rome A and then Rome B that we're going to see tonight. But in Daniel 2, what was the deal? There were 2 legs and then 10 toes. That Rome picks up and moves everybody to Byzantium, Constantine, and renames it Constantinople. That's why the 2 legs. There was a Roman leg there in Rome, in Europe, and then there was the other leg there in the eastern portion of what is Istanbul today. Go, and of course, this may be one of the most magnificent cities the ancient world had ever seen. There's the Colosseum. It still stands today. Isn't that amazing? That structure is more than 2,200 years old. Go. Artist's rendition of what it might have looked like at the time. By the way, if you want to have some fun flying through old Rome, you can. There's a couple 3D programs that'll take you through, and it was a breathtaking city. The big temple you see there, that's the temple to Rome. And then you see that statue peeking around the corner. That's called the Colossus of Nero. Colossus of Nero, because he had a big old ego, did Mr. Nero. And then the Colosseum was named after the Colossus. Go. Here's an actual model that's in Rome that you can go see. If I had the time, I'd take you around, but all of the great honchos, they have their temples, and then they have their gods and temples. But that was an amazing city that was 2,000 years old. Go. Then Rome B is going to show up. Go ahead. We saw a little bit of it in Daniel chapter 2. That is a Rome that's going to rise again from the old Roman Empire. Now tonight, go ahead. That's not how God sees these empires, as these, metals, because, humans love their metal. We think we're made of metal, gold and silver and iron. And God says, well, this is how I see those. Same kingdoms as ravenous beasts who tear up God's people. We'll leave that one up if you would, Blake, and let's dive in. Chapter 7, book of Daniel. Going to actually prophesy the Babylonian, Medo-Persian King Cyrus the Great. Isaiah names him by name before he's even born. Then the Greeks, we're going to get some startling specifics about Alexander the Great. And then we're going to see, of course, Rome itself. You guys, the Bible that we have is amazing. Chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, we saw him in chapter 5. So before the events of chapter 5, this is Daniel remembering back. Belshazzar should have been preparing Babylon for King Cyrus's troops, but he didn't. Chapter 5, he threw a great big party. Well, before that, this is when this takes place. So in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, he is Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. Hey, we saw that in our book of Revelation study. Winds prophetically, or when they're used as a model, are always judgments. Metaphorically, they're God's judgments. Exodus 15, God stops the wind that opened up the Red Sea and drowned the Egyptians. Remember that? And then Numbers 11, God brings the wind, but what's on the wind? A bunch of quail. And then Revelation 7 that we saw on Sunday, 4 winds are held back because that's the midpoint of the Great Tribulation. So time out while we seal those 144,000. Anyway, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. Now, literally, this would be the Mediterranean Sea. But metaphorically or model-wise, these are people. What do you mean, people? You can write in your margin, Isaiah 57, verse 20. But the wicked are like a troubled sea. If you can think in your mind's eye of a restless sea, think of a bunch of 10,000 humans all agitated, they would look similar. But the wicked are like a troubled sea, says Isaiah, when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. There is no peace, says my God, for the wicked. Without righteousness, there is no peace. And then you might want to write also Revelation 17, verse 15. Revelation 17, verse 15. Then he said to me, this angel speaking to John in the book of Revelation, chapter 17, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are people, are humans, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So what this is going to be is twofold. These kingdoms are going to border the great sea, and they are going to sit on top, as it were, a bunch of humans, 10,000 times 10,000s over several centuries. And they're not going to do a great job. That's the point. Verse 3. And 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, out of those humans, that whole big group of humans, each different from one another. Verse 4. The first was like a lion. There you see up to the top left. But it had eagle's wings. Go ahead, Blake. Hey, remember that? That is one of the sort of depictions of Babylon itself. And I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to him. Lion, of course, is one of Babylon's big emblems. And then you can write your margin here. I'll just give you 2. I've got several. You can write Jeremiah 4, verse 7. You can write Habakkuk 1, verse 8, that says that the lion represents Babylon specifically. Hit our go button, Blake, and then we'll get back. There you go. Now, what do you mean the wings were plucked? What's that about? In chapter 4, remember, Nebuchadnezzar got so big for his britches. What did God do? He pulled his sanity away from him. And remember, he slept outside and he ate grass and all that kind of stuff. The wings were plucked, was predicting that Nebuchadnezzar was going to be removed from authority. Hence, the wings are taken off until he repented. That's what that means. Continuing now, Daniel goes on, and suddenly another beast, the second, but it was like a bear. It was raised up on one side, but it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, arise and devour much flesh. Who is the bear? That's the Medo-Persians. Less graceful than a lion, yet ponderous and powerful. And that's who the Medo-Persians were. And when they rolled with their army, they rolled with upwards of 1,000,000+ guys. And in 5 centuries in front of Jesus' birth, 1,000,000 guys in your army? That's pretty sort of you're not going to stand in the midst of that, I'll tell you. In today's demographics, there would be no comparison. There's 8 billion people on the planet? I couldn't do the math off the top of my head, but it would be an army that most people are like, look at all those guys, gulp. What do you mean raised up on one side? That means that one side is going to be stronger than the other. It started out as a Medo-Persian coalition, but eventually King Cyrus becomes stronger, and eventually it becomes known as the Persian Empire. Starts out with 2, but one side is stronger. In chapter 8, the same detail is described as 2 horns. We'll see that next week. Now one is smaller at first, then grows these horns, chapter 8, to overtake the larger horn. What about the 3 ribs? What's that about? Because he was at Famous Dave's. That's why he got some ribs. Now I'm thinking about Famous Dave's. No, that means that these are going to be 3 huge kingdoms that Medo-Persia and ultimately Cyrus is going to take. Who are they? Lydia. We don't hear a lot about Lydia, but it was huge. And Cyrus wiped them out. Of course, Egypt and then Babylon. He defeated Egypt when he defeated Pharaoh Necho at the Battle of Carchemish. And then he takes over Babylon, as you know, in that stunning military victory. He diverts the Euphrates River upstream. The water level near the walls of Babylon go lower. Commandos go into the wall, run around to the Ishtar Gate, open it up, and the Persian army pours in. And in one night, Belshazzar is killed, and all the people look up, and there's new police officers on all of the corners. Verse 6. And after this I looked up, and there was another one. And this was like a leopard, but it was weird. On its back it had 4 wings of a bird. Wings are an idea of authority and power. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Why is this talking about the Greek Empire? Because Alexander the Great dies, in his 30s, early 30s. And he died in Babylon. And he wept because there were no more worlds to conquer. He had conquered so much of the world young in his life. And he died at a young age. What happened to the great Greek Empire? It was given to, guess how many of his generals? 4. 4 generals. This description of how Greek army was going to conduct itself is also quite prophetic. A leopard is fast, way faster than a bear, way faster even than a lion. In chapter 8, this beast moves so fast, its feet don't even appear to touch the ground. It's indicative of the speed with which Alexander the Great conquered much of the known world. It's in the decisive battle of Issus, for you history nerds, 333 BC, in southern Turkey, that he wipes out the last of the Persians. And that was getting back. Alexander's father told him those terrible stories of when the Persians were expanding their muscle and might, that they were expanding and they were going after a bunch of Greek soldiers. And they're at the bottom of the Black Sea, where the Black Sea is going to empty into the Mediterranean Sea. There's a pinch point. It's called the Dardanelles. And that's where the Battle of Thermopylae took place. There's been like 55 movies about that. The 300. What's that? The Persians are coming with their close to 1 million soldiers, and the Greeks are not very strong. And to get the last of their army across the Dardanelles, they left behind 300 Spartans. And the story goes that the bravery of those 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae stalled the Persian advance long enough that the Greek armies were spared. And it's the fodder for great movies, the 300. Well, Alexander the Great's father told him about that terrible slaughter and how awful the Persians were to the Greeks, especially those 300. And it just chafed Alexander so much. And when he finally meets the last of the Persian Empire at Issus, he was fighting. Alexander the Great defeats the last of the Medo-Persian army. They had 1 million guys. Alexander had an estimate 35,000 soldiers. How did he do it? He outflanked them. 4 wings. Alexander used a highly mobile form of attack, utilizing 4 brilliant generals. Hitler and his war planners studied Alexander the Great in great depth, and they formulated a lightning warfare that eventually became known as the Blitzkrieg. Where did he get that? They rolled through Poland, if you remember, in a matter of days. And they really didn't stop, did the Nazi machine, pretty much until they got to the English Channel. Do you remember pictures of Hitler, hands behind his back, admiring the Eiffel Tower? Blitzkrieg. He got it from the flanking maneuvers of Alexander the Great. Only instead of horses, he had mechanized machines of war, tanks that were very fast, and artillery as well. Well, anyway, who were those 4 generals? It was Cassander, and when Alexander dies, he says, break up the entire Greek empire to my 4 generals. So Cassander takes Greece and Macedonia. Lysimachus takes Thrace, Bithynia, and much of Asia Minor. Seleucus, he takes Syria, Babylonia, all the way east to India. Ptolemy, he settles in Egypt, Israel, and Arabia. Eventually, Cassander's lot and Lysimachus's lot fall to both Seleucus in Turkey and Ptolemaeus in Egypt. And then for the next 400 years, from the last prophet there in the Old Testament book of Malachi until John the Baptist shows up, a lot of people call those the silent years, but they're not silent. We'll get to Daniel chapter 11, and it's going to tell the future so specifically of what's going to happen. The Ptolemy boys in the south, Cleopatra, Elizabeth Taylor, who falls in love with Mark Antony, Richard Burton, she was not Egyptian. She was Greek. She was a Ptolemy. The Ptolemy boys are always going up to the north and hacking it out with the Seleucids. And then the Seleucids would get mad and they'd come down and try to whoop upon their brothers, their former Greek colleagues there in Egypt. Back and forth, back and forth. Well, if you do a map, what country are they always traipsing through when they do so? Israel. And the Bible is going to have a lot to say so specifically about those 400 years. They're not silent. God told us all about what was going to happen. Even the Maccabees in Hanukkah is all prophesied in Daniel chapter 11. But this is how it got set up. The Greek Empire took all that stuff that they did, and then when Alexander dies, Ptolemy settles and rules northern Africa, especially Egypt, and Seleucus, Asia Minor, or what we would call today Turkey. And that's going to set up what happens in the next 400 years. Verse 7. After this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth, and it was devouring, breaking into pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. This beast is so unsettling that there's no earthly sort of equivalent, so he just calls it a big old beast. So dreadful, so exceedingly strong, Daniel can find no earthly equivalent. At its peak, go ahead, I think I have a map coming up next. Look at the Roman Empire. It was astounding. The Mediterranean was called the Roman Lake. That is amazing. And of course, they drew taxes and tribute from all of these locations, and that's why Rome was unfathomably wealthy, more so than any humans had ever seen at the time. But look how big their empire was. Pretty amazing. It's amazing, too, if you do some study and some traveling, you go to Ireland, and there are Roman ruins in Ireland and the UK. You go all the way to almost India on the other side, well, maybe not all the way to India, but certainly go into Asia Minor and all that, and there are Roman ruins everywhere, and even in North Africa. We have to understand that they were huge, and that's why Daniel said, I can't even describe this beast. Nobody could stop it. At its peak, by 117 AD, Rome controlled southern Britain, much of Europe, including France, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, west of the Rhine River, most of North Africa, all of Asia Minor, east to the Fertile Crescent, that's the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, Caspian Sea, and the Persian Gulf. And though in decline in the 2nd century AD, ultimately Rome itself was overrun by the Goths in 410 AD. Technically speaking, Rome was never captured, because a big part of it goes east to Istanbul, and that eastern leg of the Roman Empire, it rules fine, thank you very much, for the next 1,000 years. 324 AD, Emperor Constantine moves the capital to Byzantium, calls it Constantinople, and as I said, we know it today as Istanbul. 1453, finally, Rome falls to Muhammad II and the Ottoman Turks and becomes the capital of the Ottoman Empire there in the east. And all those churches that the Byzantines built, they were just converted to mosques. And then finally in 1930, after British, French, and Italian rule, is named Istanbul. Now the Fourth Empire is going to remain until it is replaced by the kingdom of the millennial reign, Jesus Christ. Remnants of the Roman Empire tried to rise again. If you're familiar with your history, they've endured even into recent past. What do you mean? Pieces of the old Roman Empire have tried and failed to rise to world domination. The Spanish Armada, if you know how they controlled much of their part of the world, then the English took over, defeated the Spanish Armada, and then English imperialism. They didn't have the largest nation contiguous. Russia still holds that sort of title. But if you take the entire United Kingdom, parts of Canada, all the way across the world, England had at one time, that little island nation, controlled 1/4 of the earth's population. That's amazing. And then remember France and Napoleon and Germany twice. Bismarck the first time, and then the fellow with the funny mustache, Mr. Hitler. Now we're going to talk about Rome B. Hit the up arrow if you would, Blake, go ahead. That final beast, we have to understand, this is, first of all, how amazing is God's word? God knew about the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, and the Greeks. He knows about the 4 generals. God knew everything. And that's the God we worship. And that's the God we love and serve. He knew about the Roman Empire, that nobody could stop it. And he knows it's never going to be technically conquered outright, but it will fade and will be reborn. We'll leave that up for a second. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Horns are a signet of authority. And this coincides with Daniel chapter 2, the 10 toes. And is it possible that there's going to be 10 regions of Europe that's going to be kind of the honcho where the Antichrist is going to set up shop? Could be. Is it 10 regions of the world? Could be that as well. Get our study on Daniel chapter 2, and it's fascinating that the European Union started it. Started what? In World War II, they got overrun by the Nazis because they couldn't agree on anything. Their borders were such they couldn't kind of mount the united defense. So after World War II, they began talking about we need to have a kind of a United States of Europe. The idea was first floated and published, interestingly enough, in the year 1948. But in 1951, the first Treaty of Paris was signed by 6 European nations, coal and steel. Today it is called, hit our down button, there's the Roman Empire. Today it's called the European Union. What's fascinating is it works. Their gross national product is 3rd in the world behind the United States and China, and for a lot of it, it is working. They're now cooperating. You can move freely in between all those states with hardly a glance at a passport. Tariffs and various other former boundaries have been waived, and a United States of Europe has been very successful. They have a capital. Go ahead. There's a picture of the Treaty of Paris, and there's your first 6 nations that actually signed documents of, hey, this is a good idea, this United States of Europe. Go ahead. There's their building. That's Brussels, Belgium. That's their Capitol building. We typically see on the right-hand side walking up the main road with the flags, but I figured you better see the whole building. How big is that building, you guys? Let's go inside. Go. There's the inside. There is the Parliament for a United States of Europe, and it is quite effective in many respects. You have to understand that there is a prime minister, or I should say an executive, over this entire branch. They have their own national anthem. Hit the go button. They printed their own money. You'll notice on the euro you have buildings, but they're rather non-specific. We're going to see something in our teaching tonight, that the Antichrist is going to change the calendars. Why would he want to change the calendars? Because every culture's calendar is unique to that culture. In America, we want to know where Christmas is. That's really important. And we want to know what George Washington's birthday is, Martin Luther King's birthday. The Antichrist is going to wipe away all the individual nations' sort of calendar. And like we see in Europe with the euro, don't put any Washington Lincoln on the bills or the Queen of England or whatever. The French franc, the German mark has all been done away with. And those buildings on there are nondescript, so that no nation can sort of hold on to their national pride at the expense of the Union, right down to their money. The apparatus is in place that should world events happen in such a pattern, that already in the European Union, there is apparatus in place of an executive to take control of all the nations of Europe simultaneously. I don't think that's by accident. And it works so well that there are many other regions of the world that are doing something similar, not as far along as the European Union, but I've showed you those over the years. And you put them all together, and guess how many regions there are? 10. I don't know if it'll shake down that way, but it's fascinating. 10 toes on the statue, 10 horns on this critter. Well, there's one more thing. You go outside of that big old building of the European Union in Belgium, and you run into this sculpture. Go ahead. It's always amazing to me. That's a woman riding the beast. No, it's not, Pastor Steve. That's Europa and the myth. And there is Zeus, who disguised himself as a bull, and he rolls up from the ocean. A bull walking on water from the ocean. Gals, beware. Don't climb on. Europa did, and didn't work out too well for her. But Europa, of course, that's what Europe is named after. That's what the sculpture is, because it's the European Union. Hello. But it's amazing to me that in Revelation chapter 17 that there is a woman who rides the beast. The beast is the Antichrist. And who's the woman? She's the ecumenical one world religion that develops after the church is raptured out of here. That sculpture is in front of that massive parliament of a reconstituted Rome. Just saying. Anyway, we'll see how that shakes out. We're in verse 8 now. Verse 8, and we're going to go quickly from here. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little horn. That's one of the 33 titles of the Antichrist in the Old Testament. The little horn, another one that I like, a big mouth is another one. Well, anyway, this one horn came up out of the 10, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. So now there's 7. 7 heads, 10 horns. Pardon me. 7 horns, 10 heads, pardon me. And there is the horn where eyes, which is a sort of a model of wisdom. He thinks he's really smart, like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. He claims to be wise in truth, but he will hate and speak unceasingly against the true God. Right in your margin there, Revelation 13, verses 6 through 8. Verse 9 now. And I watched until the thrones were put in place. Now remember, we got 7 heads, kings, and 10 horns. That's your beast in Revelation 13 and Revelation 17. Who's the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns? It's the Antichrist. And the Ancient of Days was seated. We're going to see here a picture of zooming ahead to the end of the Great Tribulation. And at the end of the Great Tribulation, when the Lord says, okay, Mr. Antichrist, that's about enough out of you. And he'll step up at some point. Who is the Ancient of Days? That's Jehovah God. Isaiah 43, verse 13. And his garment was white as snow, holiness. And the hair of his head was like pure wool, wisdom. His throne was a fiery flame, judgment. And its wheels, you can read about that in Ezekiel chapter 1. In the burning fire, verse 10, a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him, and 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. That could be a reference to the angels, could be a reference to us who were there in our new bodies. Not really sure, but it's a whole lot of people saying, God, you're really awesome. And the court was seated and the books were open. I don't believe that these are the books of Judgment Day. There are other books that the Bible does talk about. The Bible mentions specifically the book of wars. We don't have that book. There are a number of other books that the Bible mentions. We just don't know where they are. This is a book, or the books that I don't think is the books on Judgment Day. I think this is the book that God keeps track of all the knucklehead politicians. I really believe that. I don't have time to really develop that. But if there's been some knucklehead politicians, and that's being polite, have there been awful ones? God knows who they are, and he's keeping track. Verse 11, and I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words that the horn was speaking. And I watched until the beast was slain, the 7-head, 10 horns, and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. That's at the end of the Great Tribulation, right in front of when before the 1,000-year reign. It's the Antichrist and the false prophet get chunked into eternal hell first. Now what's happening here is what the book of Luke chapter 21 calls the times of the Gentiles is now done. What's that? This is the Lord saying, all right, earthly kings and kingdoms, you've had your chance to rule my people, and all of y'all blew it. And here's the point. Can humans truly govern themselves equitably, in fairness? And the answer is, it may be in short spurts. But how many of you notice that the rich still get richer, often by exploiting the poor? If you don't like that, good. God doesn't like it either. This is the fullness of the Gentiles, I should say the times of the Gentiles is now over. And God's saying it's time for me to rule, really my son, in the millennial reign. So that's what we're seeing at this point. All right, you earthly kings and kingdoms, you beasts, y'all had your chances, now it's my turn. And Jesus is about to take his rightful place in the millennial kingdom. And please notice, not by military power, and not by political intrigue or skill, but by divine intervention. Verse 12. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their time. They had their dominion taken away. Yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. These cultures, by the way, are going to continue on for some time. Verse 13. And I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming out of the clouds of heaven. 3 guesses who that is. That's Jesus. That's Revelation 19 right here. And he came to the Ancient of Days. That's the Father. And they brought him near before him. Verse 14. And then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all peoples, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is going to be an everlasting one. Remember in Daniel 2, that big old statue? There was a rock that suddenly came out of nowhere, not made with human hands. And it grew huge. And it smashed the feet of that big old statue. Statue toppled, and then that rock, funka, 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 it crushed it into pieces and blew it away. And then that rock grew to a great mountain. That is prophetic of the millennial reign of Jesus. And that's what Daniel is seeing here in chapter 7. Verse 15, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body. Why was he grieved? Wouldn't he be happy that the Lord's coming? I believe he is. But before he does, hey, how much, if you would, Blake, can you find the slide with the 4 animals? How much awfulness did the lion cause? How many deaths did the bear cause? And the leopard. And by the time you get done with Rome A and the Antichrist, Rome B, tens, I would say probably billions, tens of billions of people have been ravaged by these earthly kingdoms that they let the devil speak to their hearts. And all of the despots who have ever lived, and all of the terrible people. Some within recent, the Khmer Rouge in Vietnam and so on, responsible for tens of millions of deaths. Joseph Stalin, conservatively, is responsible for tens of millions of deaths. Mao Zedong, tens of millions of deaths. And God says, that's it. I think that's why Daniel is grieved. Oh, what these beasts have caused. Continuing, and the visions of my head troubled me. And I came near to one of those who stood by. Daniel 8 is going to identify this angel. It's Gabriel. And asked him the truth of all this. And so he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Those great old big old beasts, which are 4 kings which shall arise out of the earth. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greek, Rome A, and Rome B. Verse 18. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. That's actually the New Jerusalem and afterwards. Verse 19. And then I wish to know the truth about that 4th beast. Boy, was that a freaky looking beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and nails of bronze, which devoured and broke into pieces, then trampled on everything with his feet. And then what about those 10 horns that were on his head? What's that about? And the other horn which came up before, which before 3 fell, namely that horn which had all those eyes, and a huge mouth, which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. Verse 21, and I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints. Now the camera's going to move left or go to the back portion or go back into the Great Tribulation and primarily look at the second half of the Great Tribulation. Yeah, what about that? That little horn thing, he was killing and prevailing against the saints of God. Revelation 13. Jesus said that the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. Amen? Have there been idiots that the devil has placed within the church, and has many terrible things happened in the name of Christianity? But all in all, there has always been a remnant of truly gifted, born-again people. There's always been a remnant. They were never going to be ultimately prevailed upon. This group of people, they are prevailed upon. This is not the church. We saw them in Revelation 7. These are the tribulation saints. Verse 22. Well, they were persecuted and they were wiped out until the Ancient of Days showed up. Revelation 19. And a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High. And the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom, millennial reign. Verse 23, and thus he said, the 4th beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from all the other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth. This is why I believe my theory on not a local or European division of 10, right here, the Antichrist is going to control how much of the planet? All of it. That's why I believe a 10-region worldwide sort of 10 horns, 3 of which are uprooted. I think that is going to be Europe and Asia, but I think it's the whole world. Now, we know that's not the Romans because the Romans had a bunch of land, but did they control the whole earth? Nope. This one is going to devour the whole earth and trample it and break into pieces. Rome A never accomplished that. This must be Rome B, the European Union to start, but then eventually I believe the Antichrist is going to divide the whole planet into 10 regions. Verse 24, the 10 horns are the 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom. One of the details of the Antichrist is he must come from Rome A. And another shall rise after them, he, this is the Antichrist. You can write the A/C, the Antichrist. He's going to be different from the first ones. He shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High. He shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change the times and the laws. Change the calendars. Why? Because that is a culture sort of rallying point. Who are we? We are Washington, Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., etc., etc. That's who we are. Well, the Antichrist is going to do away with all that, all to worship him. Another thing I think is happening too is he does not want people to start counting the days. When the abomination of desolation happens, that is clica, count 1,260 days until Revelation 19. I wonder if the Antichrist is going to try to muddy the water. I don't know. We'll see. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time 1, times 2, so there's 3, and a half a time, 3.5 years. The last part of the Great Tribulation is when the Antichrist is owning the whole planet. And what's he doing? The first 3.5 years, the Jews think he is their Messiah. He pretty much leaves them alone, builds them their temple there in Jerusalem, and they think he's their Messiah. He promises to protect them. What happens at the midpoint? There's a murder attempt against him. He is wounded in his eye and his arm. He fakes a resurrection. And now he says, nobody worships anybody but me. He goes into the Holy of Holies of the temple he built, the third temple there in Jerusalem. He puts a statue of himself there. And from the second half tribulation is when 2/3 of the Jewish people are killed. If they didn't get to where, prophecy students? The rock city of Petra. So the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, the Antichrist is given the ability to conquer everything. Why would God allow that? Remember, much of Revelation is so horrific because that is God taking his hand of protection and provision off of planet Earth. And one of the first things the humans do is invite Lucifer to run the show. And he does. And what does he do with his Antichrist running the show? He just about ruptures the entire planet. And if Jesus didn't come back and stop the battle of Armageddon, how much flesh would be left? None. See what happens when the humans are trying to run the show? Verse 26. For the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. Before the millennial reign begins, Revelation 19, Jesus shows up on the planet. We're with him. He stops the battle of Armageddon. He chunks the Antichrist and the false prophet into the forever hell. They're the first inhabitants of that place. Verse 27, then the kingdom and dominion of the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. And his kingdom, the millennial reign, is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So here's the inevitable end of humans trying to govern themselves. Beastly, a terrible devouring and consuming of people, grinding up humans at a breakneck pace. Huge principle. Are you seeing it, Harvest? Humans cannot govern themselves. And that means me too. I can govern myself fine, thank you very much. Really? The macrocosm is, look what these things are doing. They're chewing up people. And when you grab the steering wheel away from God, I got it, Lord. We will do the same thing. Are you sure? Mm-hmm. Because the heart of man is exceedingly wicked and deceitful. Who can know it? Not even you. And so any good thing that does visit our lives, it's because of God's grace. A movie star, an athlete may say, I'm doing very well. I don't love God. Well, yeah, but God is doing that because he's blessing you. He pulls that mercy away. It's very different. Only Jesus, Harvest. Everybody say, only Jesus. Only Jesus is the true and righteous King of nations, of me. Finally, verse 28. And this is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me, and my countenance was changed. But I kept the matter in my heart until he wrote it down for us, and we're reading it today. Amen.